Let's welcome Jonah.
Hey, all right. Hello. Sorry, this talk is going to be in English, but I'll do my best. And thank you all for having me here. It's my first time in China and first time in Beijing, so it's really exciting to be here, where there's always been such a very large Appium community. So, so my name's Jonah. I started working with Jonathan Lips, who has been the leader of the Appium open source project for the past, about probably 6 years or so. Jonathan hired me at a company called Sauce Labs that has a device cloud. And at that company, there were about 3 or 4 developers whose full-time job was to develop Appium as a free and open source project for the whole world to use. So I worked with Jonathan there on that team. Nowadays, I work for Cloud Gray. That's just me and Jonathan, and we do sort of consulting for Appium. We write a weekly newsletter called Appium Pro, where we send an email about different Appium tips and tricks and different special commands and sort of ways and secrets for Appium. This is my GitHub picture, and this is my new picture. You can't change your GitHub picture, because if I change the picture, then people don't recognize me on GitHub anymore. So that has to be my picture, even when I'm old and gray, that'll be my picture. But this is my new professional picture. The circles are now more stylish than squares used to be. So my first talk, I talked about Appium at a conference called Velocity Conference. And it was a short talk, but I was sort of introducing Appium, and I was showing how you can do touch gestures. So I put that. And I guess if you talk for a conference, you sign something that they can use your face. So after the conference, somebody showed me that on their website, they used that for me. I didn't do it, but so then my friends made fun of me for stuff like that. So yeah, Tester Home. Tester Home's awesome. Back when I was working first on Appium, sometimes I would look at GitHub shows you which websites are referring traffic to your GitHub repository. And if you look, the first one's Google, and then GitHub, and Appium.io, that's the documentation. But then there's Tester Home. And Tester Home's always ranked there. Even Tester Home is above Appium Discuss. And so in 2014, 2015, I saw this. I was like, what is Tester Home? So I go online, and I use Google Translate, and I see many, many different great posts and documentation and explanations of Appium. And I'm like, wow, China has a really good Appium community. So this is from just last month. So Tester Home is still #1 community outside of Appium itself that refers things to Appium. So what do you think the #1 country in the world that uses Appium is? The #1 country that uses Appium. There's no way to know for sure, but there are ways to guess. And that country is China. Oh. Yeah. See, yeah. Good job. This uses Google Trends, so people are searching in Google, and it tells you how popular. And China's #1. But look, compared to India, China is 100 to 10. That's pretty good. So inside China, what do you think the #1 city for Appium is? Yeah, it is Beijing. So congratulations. So This talk is about just sort of reviewing the last 12 months of Appium. So we're going to talk about what has Appium done recently, and then what is Appium doing in the future. And so when we're talking about Appium, it's very important to sort of talk about the growth of the community. And so just as a review, in the last year, there's been 9 new versions. They're all still in version 1, but we're getting up there. Probably sometime this year, in the next, hopefully maybe 3 to 6 months, we should probably release Appium 2.0, and I'll talk about that at the end of the talk. So a lot of people are interested in businesses. A company wants to know what is the best tool to use. And a company does not want to use a tool that isn't growing and has a lot of popularity in the people. So they're always asking us, how many Appium users are there? And we don't know. You can't know, because Appium's not a company. It's free. It's all volunteers, or companies donate people. So there's no way to know how many people use Appium, because you don't have to sign up, you don't have to pay, so there's no way to really know. But we'd like to sometimes guess about how many people around are using it, and we want to make sure that those numbers are going up or making sure they're not going down. So I did a little bit of looking around for some ways we could guess how many people are using Appium. So one way we can look is at just GitHub metrics. Now, this was annoying. GitHub only gave me the last month of data, so it's not really showing a trend. But you can see the number of Git clones of people, copying the project on Git. I think on this one, yeah, so it's the total clones and then the number of unique cloners. And then down here we have visitors, who mostly are probably people reading the documentation, but there's also people reading the source code itself. So 20,000 unique visitors with 100,000 views. I think for a GitHub project, that's pretty good. The numbers are definitely a lot higher than they used to be. Now, Appium, you can download it from GitHub and run it from source, but I think most people install it using NPM, the package manager for JavaScript. So here are the metrics of the last 12 months or so of NPM, and you can see that they're definitely going up. Now, we can't really use these numbers because most people, their builds are very different. Like a normal Jenkins CI server probably is set up that every time you run a build, you might download Appium all over again. A lot of people have it set up that way. So we don't really know how many people are using it, because maybe you download Appium 1,000 times every day. But we can see the overall trend over time that things are going nicely upwards. So rather than just looking at Appium itself, we can also make some guesses by looking at the Appium clients. So here's the Java client, by far the most popular language that Appium is used in. And we can see that the downloads are steadily going up. It's unique IPs and also total downloads. And this is actually really great. The graph is spread out, so it looks like a pretty low line. But if you look at the numbers, it's almost, it's like a 75% increase over time, from 150,000 to 250,000. And then on the unique IPs, we're going from 25,000 to 40,000. So it's like 60 to 70% increase in just 1 year, which is fantastic news. Looking at the Python client, it's pretty much the same. It actually came out to the exact same percentage. It's like 60 to 70% up. So that's really good news too. So like I said, we can't really know how many people are using it, but the numbers are going up. And I have a friend named Sam who, every time I ask him, hey Sam, how's it going? He always just says, numbers are going up. And so really, the way he sees life, everything in life is just about a number going up. And then somebody always tells him, well, no, I want, this number should go down. And he said, well, what is the rate that number is going down? That's a positive number you want to go up. So from his view, it's all about getting the numbers up. And I think Appium is succeeding in getting the numbers up. And so that's the goal. All right, so now we'll just go through what's changed about Appium the last year or so. So starting from not the code, but the actual organization of Appium itself. People have asked me before, like, oh, how big is Appium the company? How much money does Appium make? Appium is not really a company, and it doesn't make any money at all. Though Appium, the developers who work on it are mostly volunteers submitting pull requests through GitHub. And some people work full-time for their company working on Appium. So those people are paid to work on Appium, but Appium does not make any money. There's even some products like Appium Desktop that is also made by the people who work on Appium. Appium Desktop is also free. There are other companies like Soft Labs and many, many others that have built a product that uses Appium, and those companies can charge money for it, but Appium is free for you to use if you want to do it. So Appium, though, does have a legal entity. Last year, Appium was part of the JS Foundation, which was a nonprofit open source software foundation for JavaScript projects. Now, Node.js also has its own foundation called the Node Foundation, and the two both had a lot to do with JavaScript, but were kind of like separate entities, and they were bad at communicating and had some like organizational strife. So this year, just a couple months ago, it was announced that the Node Foundation and the JS Foundation are combining into the brand new OpenJS Foundation. So there's an article about it and the link on the bottom here. But the OpenJS Foundation is a nonprofit foundation that has in it the Node Foundation, so all the Node developers and decisions about Node.js, as well as several different JavaScript projects. And Appium is one of the major projects in that system. Also, if you have a open source JavaScript framework or project that you're maintaining, you can actually look up OpenJS Foundation, and you can apply to become a member of that foundation as well. There are like some sort of like steps you have to take to grow your project, but then you'll be accepted into the foundation where you can sort of be a part of the people who shape how the JavaScript community works and grows. So the OpenJS Foundation is a smaller part of the larger Linux Foundation. And so this really gives Appium, you know, a lot of stability because companies and users want to see that this thing just isn't going to disappear the day that like Jonathan and I just get bored of it or something. So Appium is its own thing as part of the OpenJS Foundation, and the OpenJS Foundation is part of the Linux Foundation. And the projects inside of the Linux Foundation are just like, you know, it's Linux, it's tons of different things. The things I put on here, these are the actual projects for in the OpenJS Foundation. So OpenJS Foundation has Appium, Dojo, jQuery, Node.js, and Webpack. And these are other projects that have started going into the process of entering the OpenJS Foundation. And there's sort of different levels that you can read about there. So going on to what else has happened, there's now the WebDriver spec. This is an official W3C standard for WebDriver API. And this came out like earlier this year as a new standard that was mostly like the old one. And Appium and the Selenium project have both completely implemented it. So that's what we have now. For a while, if you're still using a client that uses the old WebDriver specification, we used to use the JSON wire protocol. If you're still using that, Appium will support it, but probably around version 2.0, we'll remove support for JSON wire protocol and switch to WebDriver protocol support only. So if you want to upgrade Appium, you're also going to have to upgrade your clients. What is different about the WebDriver spec? It's not that much different. Oh, so in a W3C standard, there's also different like levels. So a couple years ago, it was just a working draft. Now it is a candidate recommendation. And in the next couple years, it will continue to mature, and we will then become like an official W3C specification. But for now, it shouldn't change that much. The main differences, some of the endpoints have different names. The HTTP status codes are now used. It used to be that always it would return like a 200, and then inside the payload it would say like errors code, status code this. Now the WebDriver spec actually uses the HTTP status code instead of putting it inside the JSON. The other major difference is touch actions are now totally different. A lot of the clients don't quite support the new touch action API. Java does, because I recently used that. But it's definitely a little bit more confusing than it used to be. But it also allows for support of all devices. But if you have any complicated touch action code, you're probably going to have to rewrite that in the next year or so. Appium has also been working on all of its different drivers. I think last year Jonathan talked about the architecture of Appium with all the different drivers. So right now there's 2 drivers for iOS and 2 main ones for Android, or kind of 3. So what we're going to be doing is in version 2.0, the automation name desired capability will be required. Right now it's optional. We're also going, right now, XCUI test is default on iOS, and UI Automator 2 is the default on Android. This year we also added Find by Image to Appium itself. This sort of thing used to be available in a lot of different clients and plugins. Now it's available in Appium natively. So it's a new locator strategy called -image. And you can use it on every single one of the drivers, iOS and Android, and other platforms too. You pass in a base64 encoded image. It, takes a screenshot, finds it on the page. It does a little fuzzy matching, not just pixel by pixel, and it'll return that element to you. This has been in Appium for, I think this was added pretty early in the year, but we have this now. There's also, Jonathan announced there's a new AI selector plugin. So what this does, basically, is they used machine learning on a large set of icons. And so with this selector, you can say, like, tap on shopping cart, or, like element.click, or element.find, like, check mark, or like timer or clock or something. And then it will use machine learning to recognize that thing on your app, even if it doesn't have an exact sample image that you've used before. You can read about it here on this link. It's still in its early stages. I think it's kind of slow. Actually, I think it's really slow. and also it's not always right. So this is something you can definitely look into more. It uses a new thing also that Jonathan added, which is the fact that it's a custom plugin. So right now on Appium, you can write a JavaScript program that is a new selector, and you can upload that to Appium, and Appium will download it from NPM and run that selector instead of one of the usual ones. So if your company has a custom way of finding elements, you don't need to fork Appium. You can use a selector plugin and add it to any Appium instance. So definitely worth a lot more looking into. This link here will also explain about exactly how to use it. Basically, if you create any JavaScript module that has this function for finding elements, then that is now a selector plugin. Appium also improved its CI a lot last year. Even Appium has to have its own CI, so a lot of work has been on that. Appium has hundreds of tests, and it's been really great that they're running in the cloud and running every commit, stuff like that. So that helps keep Appium safe for everybody. We added streaming video from all devices. So if you want to stream video from iOS or Android devices, you can send this command. Appium will open up a separate WebSocket port where you can connect to it, and it'll send you an MJPEG stream of the video. Most people don't know this, but it's actually available right now on Appium. We also internationalized Appium Desktop. It's now available in all of these languages. I think actually several have been added after I added this slide. And a bunch of other stuff happened too. You can now use the copy-paste clipboard. Android device logs are available through a WebSocket instead of just getting the logs, which is really nice if you want to tail them. You can get battery info from the devices. The Espresso driver has added a lot of very interesting mobile commands that are worth looking into. We have the Tizen driver used for running Samsung devices. We've added Face ID to iOS, and we've improved XPath performance. This year also, just two weeks ago in India, was Appium Conf. We had a conference about Appium. It was pretty great. I was there, Jonathan was there, and most of the Appium committers were there. Really good resource for when you're working on things with Appium. Jonathan did a keynote presentation, and he continued his theme of anything should be testable using Appium. Jonathan doesn't want to just test apps with Appium. He doesn't want to just test desktop apps with Appium. He wants to be able to test anything with Appium. So he did a very interesting talk. You can watch the video included there. He also added the code for it, where he had a Raspberry Pi computer that was running like a drum machine, where he pressed a button and it'd make a sound. And then he used another Raspberry Pi to control it with Appium. So the Raspberry Pi became an Appium driver, and he sent WebDriver commands to the Raspberry Pi, and it actually connected the circuits and tested his microcontroller. It's a little bit complicated. You can see more in the video there in his talk. I also added some new documentation for Appium's desired capabilities. Appium has 180 desired capabilities. I did one talk at Appium Conf where I talked about every single one. You can go to this website here, and it's just nicer documentation. I kind of organized it better, put some tags in there, because really, many people run into issues with Appium, and their whole issue can be solved with just one desired capability, but they don't know that, because there's 180. So hopefully, if you check out this site, you'll learn more about all the desired capabilities for Appium, and you'll be able to overcome issues before you know it. Also, Jason Huggins, one of the original creators of Appium, still loves robots. All of the talks were recorded, so if you access this URL, hopefully you'll be able to see all the videos for all of the talks at Appium Conf. All right, so what's going on for Appium next? There's a couple things we're working on. One, like I said, automation name, desired capability is going to be required. We're also going to remove the older drivers. These are very difficult for us to maintain, and they're pretty old now. They usually work only with older versions. They're based on old technologies that Google and Apple don't really support anymore. So we'll be getting rid of the Appium iOS driver, we'll be getting rid of the Appium Android driver, and the Appium Slendroid driver. If you still need to use these, you'll still be able to run the old versions of Appium. If you really need to use these, contact us on GitHub, and maybe we can figure it out, but you're probably going to have to support them yourself. Now, we're also going to put the code base into one repository. For those of you who have looked at Appium on GitHub, you've probably been pretty confused about how you're following a function and just use another module and go to a different GitHub repo, and then they use a different GitHub repo. So we're going to put all that together. And the other thing we're going to do is that the drivers will no longer come with Appium. So right now, when you install Appium, it installs all the drivers for every device type. And most people don't really need that. And it also causes a very big install bundle on your CI servers. So how Appium's going to work in version 2.0 is you'll be able to install the different drivers that you need as different modules. And that is explained. There's a document I'll link to later in the presentation so you can read more of the details. The other big thing coming for Appium 2.0 is we're going to allow custom plugins to Appium for each command. So if you want to run custom code for a specific Appium command, there will now be a way to do that. I was told that many people, where they work, have to have basically forked their own version of Appium, and they have to maintain some features separately from the rest of Appium. And every time Appium updates, they have to update. Hopefully, this will take care of a lot of those issues for people. So you'll be able to define custom plugins that will run on your test. So the way it works is whoever starts the server will install the plugins and say, like, Appium's running with this plugin. And then when you start your test, you'll send in desired capabilities and say, I want to use these plugins. Then for your test, it will use those plugins, but other tests that don't use this desired capability will still use normal Appium. A plugin will be able to extend the base command plugin class, and you'll provide an on-command function. So basically, if you want your Appium, when someone says driver.tap, if you want to click instead, or maybe you want to do something different, like double tap every time they say one tap, or maybe you need to do tap 10 pixels up and 20 pixels over, you can have a command where you write your own JavaScript plugin, and your plugin will run before and after the regular Appium command. You can also completely just run your own thing. You can also write your plugin that will just run code when the Appium server starts, but then have nothing to do with any of the commands. Now, this is still a work in progress. We've just done some of the beginning work on this, sort of deciding how it's going to work. And definitely, if you have your own input in how you want it to go, please comment on this design document that Jonathan posted in GitHub. As we want to make sure that this plugin has good use cases for everybody. So if you think that it's something you could use, but maybe this format doesn't work for you, please chime in on the conversation here, and we'll all find a good way to make Appium better for everybody. And that's it. Thank you very much. I think
有同学有想 Q&A 的吗？
questions here.
麻烦给一下话筒。这边。
Hello, my English is a little poor. So, do you think the image-based automation will be the trend in the future?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Right now, I think that the only reason people like to use the image-based testing is because they're trying to test games. And that's currently the only way we have of testing games. But I don't think that it's a very good way of testing. For example, it works fine in 2D games, but not so well in 3D games, right? Because if you have an image and you look from a different side, it might not recognize it with our current, advancement in AI. Now, there are newer machine learning algorithms that can recognize something like from the side and from the front, but those are very expensive and very advanced. And I think it'd be much easier instead if the game engines were to support the WebDriver framework. Many games are written in Unity. Unity is aware of all of the objects currently in the scene, and that's all inside of the Unity code. All Unity needs to do is implement the WebDriver API inside Unity, and suddenly we would be able to test all of our games without having to use image recognition. So I think it's not really the way to go, but there are definitely arguments, people thinking about the future of testing, and definitely with the image recognition, you could write tools that are much easier to test your code, right? You could write your test much quicker, just select an image and go. But it seems like that's, I don't really think that's the way it should go, but it could.
Thank you.
还有一个这边。
Thank you, Nash. I'm a fan of Appium, and we use Appium at early version of Appium. But today, we do find that there are many exciting features and a lot of improvements that you have mentioned today. But today I have a question for iOS. Currently, Appium for iOS depends on the WebDriver agent, which provided by Facebook.
Facebook, yeah.
Yes. So we found that it takes time to build. It takes time for Appium server to build the connection between the WebDriver agent server. So from our experience, it takes many time, and it may be filed to build the connection. So it may make our test unstable and slow. So do you have any suggestion? This is the first question. And the second question is, do you have the plan to give up the WebDriver agent or other solutions?
Right, right. That's
Thank you.
that's a great question. So to the first question, what you could do now, are you talking about just the connection or also the time it takes for Appium to build WebDriver agent? Because it also takes like 30 seconds to a minute just to build WebDriver agent, right? So for that, there actually is a desired capability that you can specify your own pre-built WebDriver agent, and so it won't rebuild it. I believe there's another desired capability that says that there's already WebDriver agent on the device, so you don't have to upload it. That also takes time. The actual connection, I don't know of a way to make that faster currently. So your question about, like, does Appium rely on WebDriver agent? It is something we're talking about right now. So Appium's core philosophies, one of them is that we always use the native automation library provided by the device manufacturer. So as long as Apple is providing us with XCUI test, which it seems like they're very dedicated to, they've just been improving it every year. As long as Apple's still using that, we'll still use some version of something like WebDriver agent in order to automate it. Now, WebDriver agent does some things that are pretty advanced. It does like method swizzling, and it accesses some, hidden APIs. So that's the reason we use WebDriver agent right now. But recently, so WebDriver agent was developed by Facebook, and Facebook actually is no longer supporting it. They'd been like doing less and less every year, and recently all the work on WebDriver agent has been done by Appium developers. And this year, just like a month or two ago, Facebook actually moved WebDriver agent's repo into like archive repo. So they've really shown that Facebook is no longer supporting WebDriver agent. So we're talking of bundling WebDriver agent into Appium and sort of taking over the development of that. And we're thinking, people are talking about beginning to rewrite WebDriver agent in Swift. So if we do a rewrite, there's a chance that your issues will be improved. But if it has to do with the actual like connection logic, I don't know how much of that is related to WebDriver agent and how much of it is just related to like how XCUI test works. But if that's something you're interested in, you could also definitely create a GitHub issue on the WebDriver agent repo. And if you want to be a part of like rewriting parts of WebDriver agent into Swift and maybe improving that connection, then we could definitely work together on something like that. Any other questions? Oh, there's one there. Or are we done? Or